This is the second World Insights or Insights World Tour, or OE Insights World Tour. We're here, as you know, as a group of small group discussions. These are by design small groups, not the standard webinar format. And I'll also remind you that these sessions are being recorded, and that if during the presentation, if you could keep yourself off video and muted, that would help. And then what we'll do is once we finished up, we'll ask everyone to come back on video and for a short period of discussion and interaction. It's the standard ways in which you'll communicate, as you can see here. And I'll also remind you that this is one of 15 different lectures we're having. So if you've had a chance, if you haven't had a chance to sign up for the other ones and if something is of interest to you, please do take a look. You can find them at the oeworldtour.com. Or through other sites that you've obviously registered for this one, so you'll be able to find them. So take a glance at the other ones. If something's interesting, do sign up. So without further ado, I'd like to invite you to a session which I think is particularly near and dear to my own heart. You hear here the title, You've Got Talent, Now Develop It, Lessons Learned. And no one better, I think, to speak to this issue than friend and colleague and recently minted professor and academic head of the Division of Orthopedic Surgery at McMaster University, Dr. Femi Ayeni. Femi? Oh, Femi, you're muted.
Just one more example why I'm not Mo Bandari, right? Starting off on mute. But I wanted to first extend some thanks to Mo for his gracious invitation to be a part of this unique group of people and to really talk about something that always hovers in the background when it comes to career progression, and I think something that's really applicable to all of us as we are in different stages of career, whether you're a trainee, whether you are in practice, and whether you are just applying to medical school or even looking at advanced leadership roles. So I think we all sort of have that thought that, wow, there's a natural, when it comes to this discipline or specialty, but the reality is everybody's a natural, and with some focus and some direction and some mentorship, it's very possible to develop each of your unique talents. So when Mo asked me to, talk about this, I thought about my own personal journey into orthopedics and, more importantly, into the world of hip impingement and outcomes research. And I thought we'd talk about that journey and highlight some things where I think that everybody, out there, and those particularly on this call and in this chat, really has the ability to develop talent and, shoot for the stars. So I will start to share my screen momentarily. And at that point, we can start to really talk about what this webinar was slated to be all about. So I'm sharing screen now, and here we go. So grateful again for the invitation. And I think my talent development journey is probably similar to everybody's, development and their steps in trying to get to what they perceive as the top of the mountain. And really, for anybody out there, there should be a goal, a destination, something that you are striving for, and that really makes the journey certainly more rewarding when you have a defined goal and a defined target. And when it comes to developing talent, it doesn't strictly have to pertain to medicine. It could be fitness, it could be well-being. Any aspect really is something you can develop. And I think the takeaway here is that everybody has talent. It's a matter of really fine-tuning it to get to where you ultimately want to land. So, for me, when I first finished my residency and I started back at McMaster, I had a discussion with Mo amongst many people, and I was really excited because I had done a couple of fellowships in sports medicine and arthroscopy, and the thoughts were, well, okay, I have these skills and I have multiple joints where I could really focus on, And this is the first stage that I thought was very important, which is the goal setting piece. And with regards to that, I thought, okay, let me really try and master rotator cuff surgery. So I clicked on PubMed, and I kind of, said, okay, if I really wanted to be a thought leader in, rotator cuff, repairs and whatnot, what would it look like? And I clicked on that and searched, and this is relevant to 2009. And I, came up with almost, 4,500 studies. And when that happens, I recognized that, okay, that'll be a tough climb to try and attain, expertise in, because there are already almost 5,000 papers on this focused topic. And so then I, went on to ACL, which you see next to it. And I had some very good knee skills and training, and I trained with some really good experts. And I recognized that there were, approaching 8,500 papers on ACL surgery. So again, in setting my career goal as to where to master, really to try and become, a force in some discipline that had, approaching 9,000 papers, really would be hard to make a dent. And so I went to the next field, which was hip impingement. And in 2009, not now, when I searched, I found 580 something papers. And I recognized that if I wrote 5 papers out of 500, I would be responsible for 1% of the world's literature. And I thought, wow, that's pretty compelling. If people can say, well, he's written 5 papers and that's 1% of the world's, knowledge based on something, that's a pretty big deal. So right there in setting my goals, I felt that although the other fields were great, from an academic focus and goal setting, I was sort of looking at the so-called blue ocean, where it was wide open, it was a bit untainted, there really wasn't a ton of data or research being done, there was a lack of understanding, and really trying to become somebody who understood more about this field was something that I thought was relevant and needed. And with the advice of mentors, I decided to pursue. So when it comes to developing your talent, certainly mastering something that many people have a mastery upon can be important and good, but really trying to find a unique angle, a unique perspective, an ability to make changes or contribute in one particular area where you can have a big presence, to me was important. And so it really came to, that concept of being, in the fishbowl and being the big fish in the little pond, as opposed to being the opposite. So I felt that was, something that was, early on in career, an important concept to really nail down, which is if you have talent in multiple areas, really try and figure out which niche you could target and really have an area of dominance in. And so like everything else, if you look at great athletes, great surgeons, I thought the journey should have some strategy. So it's not a random thing to pick what you would like to be an expert in. I think it's a myth to think, oh, I'm just going to try everything and do everything and be good at everything. I mean, some people are special, they can do that. But most of us have to kind of pick an area that we want to have a certain focus on. And so the finding a great surgeon and researcher, obviously Mo Banderi being, somebody who helped in both angles, and then really spending time to develop, important relationships that were not one-offs. And I think that's very important for the trainees in the group, where, sometimes people think, well, I went to seek advice once and then that's it. And then if I run into troubles again, I'll seek advice one more time and then that'll be it. And then that sort of intermittent, input with a mentor doesn't always work so well. It has to be a continuous effort and also bi-directional. And also you have to really put in time and structure practice in the field you choose. So if you're a surgeon and you like to master a specific skill, it really is difficult if you don't put in the requisite time to become the expert and then get feedback from mentors. And Malcolm Gladwell's written about this. People debate whether this is a valid concept, but I think to some degree it's important that having structured, deliberate practice certainly can help you develop your skill set. So for me, the clinical journey was one where I had a lot of fun and really enjoyed the interactions. And to this day, I can call or text or email any one of these people. And I think, and I believe, and I'd like to even believe that I've done a reasonable job in keeping the relationships going so that they didn't have that sort of one-off, feel to them. So, at the completion of residency as a trainee, for those who don't know a lot about orthopedics or these individuals, Donald Johnson was really a Canadian icon in arthroscopy. And I felt that, in order to understand arthroscopy of the hip, for example, you have to have a base of general arthroscopic skills or minimally invasive skills. And so by going to Ottawa after my residency and really spending a year in those cases, arthroscopically, 500-600 cases, just getting your hands on the scope, getting an understanding of how to be good with arthroscopy was what I needed before I went off to New York in special surgery to work with Brian Kelly, who's in the next picture. So Don Johnson from the University of Ottawa in Canada. And from there, I went to work with Brian Kelly in New York with special surgery. And I felt that Don Johnson gave me a tremendous base of arthroscopic talent in conjunction with his other colleagues, but I felt he was a really great mentor to me. And then off to Brian Kelly to really understand arthroscopic management of hip conditions in the young individual. So after having a base of skills and then developing hip and advanced hip skills in New York with Brian, he then said, hey, listen, you should really go and learn what's happening in Europe and work with the Swiss and German groups to really understand the open concept about hip and really how to diagnose a problem, the emerging concepts in hip preservation surgery. And so I spent, with Michael Leunig, who's next from Switzerland, several weeks with him, and also with Michael Dienst in Germany, who's the final picture in Munich, really understanding the European concept of hip preservation. So about 3 months in total with those two individuals, 6 weeks each. And so at the end of it all, I felt I'd gained, from a clinical perspective, a comprehensive arthroscopic skill set, a hip-focused skill set through Brian, and then through Michael Dienst and Michael Leunig, really a good understanding of the Gansian concept of hip preservation surgery, and having a global perspective where I can say, okay, now I know what's happening in North America, I know what's happening in Europe. I can sort of now bring that knowledge of surgery back and try and develop talent, my talent, and hopefully others who intend to have talent in this field in the near future. So then came the research mentorship. And it comes as no surprise that Mo Banderi sat me down. In fact, before I started in my career in New York as a mid-year fellow, saying, hey, listen, you really should be somebody who focuses on evidence-based hip impingement surgery or hip preservation surgery. And, we don't need an introduction to Mo and what he's done. And so in mentoring me through my master's degree, I really got an understanding of the methodology pertaining to hip preservation. And also I got an understanding about how to ask important questions, how to seek answers, and really how to foster and develop that, inquisitive talent and doing research. And, as a result of that, I was able to start the first trial, which has been recently published, and really, an important paper that helps us understand how to manage hip syndromes better. And then moving on from that, Mo and his development enabled me to then develop a very strong relationship with Jon Carlson, who really is a Scandinavian legend in arthroscopy, and somebody who was able to then really broaden my horizon as to how to really diffuse knowledge, not just locally or regionally in North America, but to take the knowledge from the research and really globalize it. So I'm very grateful to these two individuals for really, more locally in Canada at McMaster, and then Jon Carlson at Gothenburg, Sweden, who was my PhD supervisor, to really understand and not just how to develop research, but how to translate it, how to present it. And those are important skills that I think are important for anybody thinking about developing into a thought leader in their field of choice. So I think this is analogous, this development, to what you see in sports, because obviously as somebody who likes sports and treats athletes, there seems to be a lot of synergies between what we do in our careers and what you see athletes do. And rarely do you ever see a #1 draft pick who's supposed to be just all raw talent, not have any development or any coaching. It comes hand in hand, as well as putting the effort in. So Here, for example, is the NBA draft from last year. And these are the world's best, junior league or college-based international basketball players in the world, right? So they have a base of talent. And I like to think that everybody on the call and everybody out there has a base of talent. So the question then becomes, if we all have talent, what separates us from those who develop and those who may not develop as well as they'd like to do? And I think that then becomes, something to discuss in the next few steps. So these individuals are all very good. They all can dribble, they all can shoot, they all played at the highest levels, they've all won awards, they all have, medals, just like any or many medical students have, had high grades and, good reference letters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we all have that unique base of talent. So everybody belongs at the dance or the party at this stage. But then when you then have that base of talent, you have to then recognize that you can't play all 5 positions. You have to pick something. And that's analogous to me saying, okay, I've got, a diverse and broad skill set here, and I've got to focus on something that potentially could be impactful. And that became in my specific career, the hip. And so likewise, if you're thinking about developing your talent and you have that talent, like we saw on the previous slide, well, you've got to, if you're playing basketball with this particular example, figure out if you're a shooting guard, a small forward, a center, power forward, or point guard. And that maybe is the hardest thing to do, is to figure out what you are, what you want to be. And it's a very tough question to answer when somebody says, well, what do you really want to do? And what do you really want to be? And it gets philosophical, but you really have to be introspective and ask that question to yourself. What do I really want to be good at? And what do I enjoy? And those are sort of tough questions when you like everything and you have to really start to focus and goal set and specialize. And that's something that I think is important as you're thinking about developing your talent and going to the next level. Well, clearly you have to practice, right? And if you look at Steph Curry, he shoots thousands of shots all the time. And likewise, in whatever you choose, whether it's medicine or not, you have to practice. And if you want to present and be a great presenter, well, you have to present more. And if you'd like to write, you have to write more. And if you'd like to do research, you do more research. And if you want to be good at surgery, the same, et cetera, et cetera. Most skills that are out there require some level of practice. And it's no surprise that people who get drafted in the NBA, for example, have played most of their lives. Very rarely do you have a phenomenon who shows up and just picks up a ball on day one and can shoot and get all the shots in and be a legend without any focused practice. So I really believe that the practical component of things and the dedication and putting time in is another key piece to developing your personal talent base. And of course, you need coaching, you need mentoring. Again, I was very lucky to have been at McMaster where Mo was available, and to also meet Jon Carlson and all my clinical mentors. I'm still very, very grateful for giving me the opportunity to really develop my talent and grow in that regard. So you need to have somebody who can give you feedback, constructive criticism, and you also have to be receptive, because it's a two-way street, right? So if somebody's trying to help you and is being critical, you have to understand that if they truly are a mentor, it's being done from a place of a desire to see you improve and not really as a personal slight. And that's something that with maturity, you tend to understand that this is not really, about me, it's about the greater good and delivering, to the best of your ability. So you really need that mentorship piece, and most players, again, need coaching. So coaching is very important into developing your talent. And sometimes you'd be surprised, as you can see LeBron James, who arguably is the greatest player of his generation, and Zion Williamson, who's proposed to be the greatest in his future generation, that you'd be amazed that some people that you may think are rivals or you think would not be interested in helping you succeed are actually the best people to communicate and contact to help with your talent. So the so-called rivals, and when you look at most great NBA players like Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson, and what they would do in the summers is have a summer league where they would all play against each other, not only to just compete, which they're all good at competing, but to really learn from each other. So sometimes if you have somebody you perceive to be an adversary in your field or competitor, really reaching out to them and saying, can you show me this move? I like how you do that, or I like how you present that, or that research concept you have is quite good. Sometimes your best mentors end up being people you thought were competitors, or people you thought, you'd have to go one-on-one with. And it still doesn't mean you don't compete, but you compete at a higher level because you actually sort of make each other better in a very strange way that tends to happen. So I would advise you that if you're looking at developing your talent, seek out people who you think you would like to compete against, or people you think are a bit ahead of you, so you can sort of enter that orbit and start to really perform at a level that you perceive to be elevated. I think that's a great thing to strive for. And then, of course, surveillance and feedback and looking at your initial goals. So if you were drafted and you thought you'd be a great player, and you've practiced and you've picked a specialty spot and you have the mentors and you've set the goals, then it's always good to circle back and say, okay, how am I doing? Am I really playing to my level of competition? Do I think I've achieved success? And again, I'm using a sports analogy, but really nothing's better than writing down some goals. And I find them to be the best goals to be the simplest ones, or, simple 3 things. I'd like to, write, 1 paper this year. Following that, I'd like to present at 1 meeting this year. And after that, I'd like to engage in 1 research project to completion this year. Something as simple as that really can be the best goal, because now you're focused on simple goals that are attainable, achievable, and you can go back upon and say, did I hit those 3 goals this year, as opposed to having very elaborate schemes and ideas that need further refinement or really seem impossible. So, I think, again, if you have talent, which everybody on the call does, I think you find an area where you can really be a substantial presence. You practice in the areas you'd like to be very good in. You find the appropriate mentors to guide you in your career development and journey. Be receptive to feedback. Really look at people who you think are functioning at the highest of levels. I reached out to Mark Philippon, who's always been great to me back when I was still a very early career person. And so, those types of individuals who you think may not have time often do. And you'd be amazed how quickly a Mo Banderi will respond to your email as a junior level trainee. So, just keep that out there, that most people who are successful like to see others succeed. And I myself, I think that's an important part of giving back. So, once you've done that, circle back to your goals and see if you've really focused on them, and if you've had a couple of fall downs or watch outs that didn't quite work out as well. And then from there, you can learn from those episodes, and even the failures are good learning points. So, summarizing this all over again, everybody can read, so I will not repeat that all over again, but these are some basic points that can help elevate everybody's game, so to speak, because I really believe everybody has talent, and it's a matter of refinement, fine-tuning, mentorship, collaboration, feedback, and being honest with yourself as to how well you're doing. So with that, I'd like to thank Mo and the OE team and Abby for the invitation, and happy to engage in some discussion. Best regards from McMaster and McMaster Hospital, where I am currently. It's a bit darker than this out there right now, but it's been great to be a part of this interaction.
That's great, Fam. Thank you so much. And if we can get to the group view here, I'll ask those of you if you can. We have a few minutes left here to chat. If you want to come on video, and if you'd like to unmute for those of you who might have a question or two to ask Femi. Let me start off though, if I can, Femi. If you look back, and first of all, thank you very much. I mean, it's a very clear, cogent presentation of what it takes, at least one pathway, and what it takes to go forward. If you were advising, and this is one of those kind of questions, if you're advising your early career self about what you just did, was there anything you do differently?
Yeah, no, you know what? Excellent question. If I think back early career self, so starting off, 11-ish years ago, I think that I would have taken, more academic, risks, so to speak, because back then the goals were just to try and get conventional thoughts out there and to sort of validate concepts. And when anybody would bring up a topic that was very interesting but seemed hard to do, I'd say, wow, that looks like an impossible thing to do, and that may take me a few more years than I'd like it. I'd like a paper in 3 or 4 months. And so, I'd passed on opportunities that I think would have been potentially impactful. So I think the goal setting piece, of course, involves having short-term goals, but having some really good long-term goals are also important too. So I would focus more, my younger self, I would have focused more on having some bigger, longer range goals too, and that could really impact the world, as opposed to, you know, some of the more local focused concepts that were great locally, but, you know, potentially with a bit more, you know, courage would have had a global impact.
Yeah, you know, and I guess I get to your point, and I get asked this question a ton too, which is, you know, there is the approach of having, you know, being very active, right? So, you know, research-wise, being active and writing a lot, which is a good thing. We all learn from that, from the research side. I'll talk to that point. And then there's that longer-term canon, which is, you know, like your first trial, right? Something that takes several years, many years, big collaborations, probably not something that's going to be repeated anytime soon because it's hard to do.
Yeah.
How do you filter that in? I mean, is that something like, you know, when we talk about impact and going to the next level, some of the things, the reason that not many people do that, it's hard. So it's sometimes easier to stick into areas where you can continue to do lots of the same thing over and over and over and over again, versus risk a bit more, risk failing a bit more. And I wonder how you reconcile that when you're kind of giving advice now to, you know, earlier career people.
Yeah, well, you know, I think what I've learned over the, you know, decade or so is that one, you know, failure really is a great learning opportunity. And the so-called failures or rejections or adverse events or episodes really are part of what make you a, you know, resilient, robust, and thoughtful individual. So having those stretch experiences where you're really, you know, stepping out of your comfort zone and getting out there and having less success than you're used to having actually makes you more analytical and sharpens your thinking, because you start to think, why didn't that work? What can I do next time to make that work? How can I improve? And it really starts to refine, you know, your own, you know, skills, and enhances potential growth in your ability to process information. So I would say that it's a great thing to sort of challenge yourself, and, you know, with the risk of failure, but recognizing that the so-called failure is actually a great learning opportunity.
Oh, I see that. And I'm, you know, I'm going to ask, I'm going to call in a few people who I see here. I see Ernesto from Spain here. I'm curious, Ernesto, from your perspective, when you hear some of the things that Femi has said, does any of this resonate with you? Is this the approach you think is the way to move forward when you're advising some of the trainees? Oh, we'll just need you to unmute.
Sorry, absolutely. It's the way, as Professor Femi has said, there is how to start in a career and how to involve the new residents and trainees in the way to have success in the near future. Obviously, it is necessary to be persistent, rigorous, to sacrifice many things, time, and many other things, and to be accustomed to failure. It is important to be accustomed to failure. That, as he has said, that probably it's a good way to learn.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, most of us are used to being successful, right? You know, whether you're in, you know, orthopedics specialist, or, you know, physical therapist, or in business, whatever it is, you know, you hit the numbers. And so certainly sometimes you've got to take a step down in order to, you know, elevate to an even greater level. And being humble and receptive to feedback is very important. And I think, as Ernesto said, if you're a trainee in any discipline, recognizing that, you know, the journey of success is not a linear one, where if you put in time and work hard, it's going to get better every year, and you get better papers and better marks and better outcomes and better sales. It doesn't sort of always work like that. And a lot of it is a very sine wave, up and down. The trend overall is up, but you have to recognize that, you know, it's not a linear pathway where, you know, everything works out for you whenever you are, you know, chasing a goal.
Yeah, the one thing I'd jump in and I'd always say is like, people always come up to me and they'll say, oh, you know what? Okay, so if we do what you did, which is you go and you get a master's degree, you go do a fellowship, you'll get a job at a place and suddenly you'll have the same trajectory. And I say, absolutely not. You won't have that because the bar just keeps moving. I don't know if you felt this. I mean, I see Lori here as well. I don't know if everyone feels that this bar is just moving. So when people say, well, it's hard to now do trials. Yeah, it's hard to do trials because there's been lots of us in the past who have done these big trials. So if you want to go and really make a difference in a field, you have to go beyond what people have already done. You have to be careful that you don't just keep doing the same thing. And I think you talked about it, right? Which is looking for the blue ocean. So what is it about an area that we can uncover or we can incrementally advance? But doing the same thing over and over again, for sure can make you successful, but will it get you to a point where you'll be able to transform, the way the way your institution does things, or maybe the way your associations do things? I think that might be very different. And I'm wondering if others, have a comment on that. Maybe I might ask you, Lori. I see you thinking about this probably. I'm curious what your thoughts are about some of this stuff. I mean, is what got us here enough for the next generation, I say, to get to where we are? I think they have to do more in my mindset.
I think they have to do more, but I think doing it differently too.
Yeah.
What I was thinking as Femi was talking, and obviously Femi has, the smarts and the personality, and he's made lots of good choices, and there's probably a good dose of luck in there too.
Yeah.
But I was super interested in your mentors, Femi, because I'm pretty sure that most of those people you had up there have been on many people's talks. And I know Don Johnson is on one of mine, and Mo's on lots of people as a mentor. And I guess my question for you is when you do all those things and everything falls into place, and you're the big kahuna, what deliberate steps should we take, or those of us who have reached a certain level, to try to identify those people who have what it takes to try something new? And I'm not sure we have to top everything, Mo, but I think we have to think of things in a different way or do things differently.
Right, your point's well taken. And let me just rephrase before Femi answers this one, which is,
Okay.
like the point is so I'll use McMaster as an example. When people come to McMaster, and let's just say they decide that we're going to do case series. It's not going to work. I can tell you, this is not going to work. You're not going to be noticed at McMaster for doing case series. Not that case series are wrong, but I'm just saying you're not going to be noticed because there are people like Femi, because there are people like Michelle Gert. There are people like Brad Petrozor who have been indoctrinated with, we are working together to try to understand evidence, and we're trying to push the envelopes, and the keyword, take risks. So you're right. I think we have to do things a bit differently.
Yeah, no, Lori, I mean, great point. I mean, I think now I'll circle back to you. Are you asking more about the trainee piece, or, if you're in a career and you want to, grow beyond you're at the highest level as the incoming president of the COA. I mean, if you're looking at going beyond that, or
Well, I guess I'm asking, everyone has different skills, right?
Yeah.
So some people have it in them to do the big clinical trials like you guys at McMaster, and other people are just really good at doing cohorts and case series, and other people are just amazing mentors. And I think those are all really important things, and they're different skills. And I guess part of your learning and directing what you do, how much of that do you try to translate to the next generation, and not necessarily med students and stuff, but do you actually identify people who you see yourself in? You go, that guy was just like I was when I was a resident. He's got so much, or she's got so much potential. And is that part of your success algorithm in there too? Or do you think there's certain people that are just good at mentoring and others that are just good at doing? I guess it's a philosophical question from my point of view.
I have a fundamental belief that everybody has a baseline level of talent that could really be developed to become a major leaguer. Now, within the major leagues, you have the perennial Hall of Famers like Mo Banderi, and you have some people who are just there, and that's an achievement. But I think that if you're going from let's say a C student and you go to an A grade, so to speak, that's almost as remarkable as somebody who gets consistent A's and gets an A+. So I think that there's an absolute number, and then there's a relative improvement in your skill and development. So, you know, if you're an absolutist, you can say, yeah, well, one person has an A and one has an A+, but if you look at where they're coming from and how they get there, those journeys are so unique that you have to recognize the process that each individual took to get there. And so in an example where, you know, maybe somebody comes and says, you know what, we do cohort studies. That's how we educate our population and inform our Ministry of Health and whatnot. I would say the challenge or the stretch experience there would be to say, hey, maybe we should do the largest cohort study in the world on this topic. And so, you know, and say, okay, well, it's not an RCT, but now you've got a cohort of 10,000 patients globally, every continent representative, generalizable, and that can still be quite impactful too. So there are many ways whereby you can take your goals and refine it to fit your institution, your organization, your subject area, and really just start to move things along. And as far as identifying people, I think the biggest, one of the biggest fall downs is I see young people who say, yeah, you know, we want to, just like you want to work, and I say, yeah, come on by. And then it becomes sort of like a conflict management relationship where it is, when I'm in trouble, I'm going to email Lori Heemstra because I'm in trouble, I need some help now. And then boom, then the email goes, the meeting happens, and then the person doesn't circle back or talk or do anything for a year or 2 or 3 until the next conflict arises. And then it's, oh, another email to solve my problem. So people have to recognize, I think, that the continuity and the circling back and the build-up is as important as handling the conflicts, because that shows you're interested in having. So I've had many people where they want to do things in a similar way, but because of the lack of continuity and you know, the communication gaps, the, you know, mentorship relationship plateaus and doesn't get to the level where it could get to. So I think, yeah, there are many people I see, but if I don't see that bi-directional interest, then sometimes there are limitations into just how far you can take people.
And you know, I would also add, if I could, and thanks for that, Femi and Lori, for those questions. A point I think that I would also maybe add would be, broadly speaking, to Femi's team approach, and to your point too, Lori, that not everyone is going to do everything, you know, at its highest level, and to set people up for multinational randomized trials is setting them up for failure. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the thing that we tend to sometimes do wrong is expect that everyone is going to be everything. They're going to be the best clinician, the best researcher, the best leader, and, you know, keep and have a wonderful life outside of all that. And it just doesn't work.
No.
And maybe what we should be doing is using the approach that you said, is align people with their passion. So, you know, you might have exceptional educators. We don't want to, I personally don't think you'd stress that person into becoming some, you know, top tier researcher. You'd have them be a super collaborator in research, I would presume. And you would do everything possible to have them mentor others in what they're really good at. And I think that's part of probably the, you know, the way we'll have to go forward. But I guess if you're speaking about one specific silo and someone self-identifies in that silo, then we should do everything possible to support them and to try to meet their full potential. That, you know, kind of way I would look at that.
No, I completely agree. I think that's well stated. And, you know, it's something where, you know, people have to also, you know, get those stretch experiences going and stepping out of the wheelhouse that, you know, has been, you know, guaranteed success, and take a home run swing once in a while.
Just before we close out, we're a little bit over, but I wanted to make sure we had a chance to get people's inputs here. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone who might be earlier career who wanted to ask a question or has been struggling with an issue or share an insight?
I would like to make a question. I'm actually just finishing my sports fellowship, and I'm kind of struggling into finding my way. Is there like a way I could like get closer to a mentorship program or something?
Sure, maybe I'll let Femi speak to that first.
Yeah, I mean, the question is quite big, mentorship program, in the sense that, you know, are you looking at a local mentor, an international mentor, a clinical mentor, or a research mentor? And I think that was one of the points I was going to make, is the same mentor who's really good at advising you clinically may not be the same mentor helping you with research, will not be the same one with personal problems. And so you almost have to have a board of directors that all serve as individual roles and advise you in different areas, as opposed to loading one person with all those issues. But that being said, I mean, mentorship really can be defined as, you know, as you're trying to grow your career and, you know, develop your talent, is what field, what region, and what are your goals. And so if your goals are, you know, patellofemoral, you know, instability and research, then Laurie Heemstra might be the right person for a clinical mentorship. And so, and if you're looking at academia at the highest of levels, then maybe it's Mo Bandari. So it, I think that if you first of all do the goal setting piece to understand what your targets are clinically and on the research front, then I would be surprised that if you sent an email and reached out to key opinion leaders, they would say no. I mean, I get emails from people all over the world, and I always make a point to respond. So I would say that if there's nobody locally, depending on what you'd like to do, reach out internationally, and I'll be shocked if you don't get a response back. Mo, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Sure. I mean, maybe Anna, you were going to say something. I'll let you maybe respond to that.
No, I was just thanking him. Okay, sorry.
Oh, great. Wonderful. No, I would echo the same thing. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. It used to be really hard prior to, quote, the internet, where you could actually communicate. But here we are, right? Here we are communicating and chatting. So I think you just have to find opportunities. And I think we too often assume that people are too busy, that they wouldn't care to help us. But you have to remember, all of us have been at the same point. Like, you know, I remember very clearly my first day of medical school and exactly my first day of residency. I remember exactly what happened that day. And you remember all the people along the way who have been helpful to you. And I think for most of us, we want to do everything we can to help anyone else, mostly from making the same mistakes we did, right? That's part of the mentorship cycle, is to help you avoid the things we've done, at least give you insight to some of the things that can happen when you move in the directions that we may have done.
Yeah, and there are lots of speed traps. And I mean, sometimes there's nothing better than somebody, it's like when your parents are saying things like, don't do that, and you just wonder, well, what they just keep saying that. And then of course, once you get singed by the fire once or twice, you kind of recognize that, wow. So even in the you know, as the mentee and not the mentor, when you deviate from some of the advice you may have received, when you then kind of learn the lesson the hard way, I think it's always important as well to circle back and say, you know what, you were right. And it's a bitter thing to do sometimes, but you have to recognize when you weren't quite as informed as you thought you were. And then you circle back to your mentor and go, oh, you know what, just to let you know that everything you said was completely right. And I could, you know, that was a learning opportunity for me, and that sort of thing. So I've been the recipient, and I've also had to say those words. And I think I learned a lot from it when I said, oh, geez, you know what, I was told, and here you go. Now I'm learning it the hard way, sort of thing. So it's a real good journey to really develop your talent. And, you know, we talked a lot about mentorship, but certainly picking a goal, focusing on an area that is untouched and really, you know, ripe for, you know, explosion, so to speak. And then, you know, really working hard and focusing, and then, you know, circling back and making sure your goals are appropriately addressed, and look at ways where you can improve and refine your goals, because you may be, I want to be the expert in this particular field, but you can really fine tune it even further, because the information out there is fast and you just can't keep up with everything. So stay focused and also stay humble, because it's a long process.
Listen, it's 6:45, folks, and I know we've kept you 15 minutes over, but I thought it was important that we continue the discussion and you know, glean as much as we could from the panel that we had. So thank you all for taking some time this evening. Thank you, Femi, again, for spending time and sharing some of your journey with the rest of us. For those of you who are interested, I'm sure he would be more than happy to answer emails and questions, as he just nicely said that he likes to help out. So, and I'm sure all the other panelists here who also contributed would be more than happy to hear from some of you who are earlier in your career. So wishing you all a good rest of your day. For some of you, it's quite late. So thank you for joining us at your hour. That's quite late for you. And look forward to seeing you at some other events. So we've got a lot of events coming up in the next few days. So please do join us.